Men saves lion from drowning, but when they reach shore, what the lion does is incredible. A man saves a lion from drowning, but when they reach shore, what the lion does is incredible. I never intended to be known as the Lion Whisperer. That title came later, after the video went viral and media outlets from around the world picked up the story. What happened that day on the banks of the Luangwa River wasn't planned, it wasn't a trick, and it certainly isn't something I would recommend anyone else attempt. But it changed my life forever. My name is Michael Foster. For the past 12 years, I have worked as a wildlife conservationist and guide at the MFU Lodge in Zambia's South Luangwa National Park. I have spent thousands of hours observing lions in their natural habitat, documenting their behaviors and leading tourists on safaris to witness these magnificent creatures from a safe distance. I thought I understood lions, their territorial nature, their hunting patterns, their social dynamics. I was wrong. It was the height of the rainy season. February 2023, the Luangwa River had grown beyond its banks, transforming much of the surrounding savanna into temporary wetlands. These seasonal floods are natural and necessary for the ecosystem, but they can create dangerous situations for wildlife. Animals can become stranded on shrinking islands of dry land, separated from their territories and food sources. That morning had begun routinely. I was taking water level readings near a section of the park we call Hippo Bend, accompanied by my colleague Joseph Banda, one of the park's most experienced rangers. We were in a small motorboat navigating the swollen river to document the flood's impact on fauna movements. "Mike, look there," Joseph suddenly said, pointing toward a commotion in the water about 50 yards ahead. Through my binoculars I could make out a large animal struggling against the current. "Lion," I said, recognizing the distinctive shape of its head above water. "The young male, I think." Joseph immediately steered our boat in that direction. Lions can swim when necessary, but they generally avoid deep water. This one was clearly in danger, his powerful limbs thrashing against the current that was dragging him toward the river's center, where the flow was strongest. "He's going to drown if we don't do something," I said, already reaching for the rescue equipment we kept aboard for emergencies, usually involving overturned tourist canoes, not drowning predators. Joseph looked at me skeptically. "Mike, that's a lion, not a person." "He's still alive," I replied. The lion was part of a pride we had monitored for years, a young male about 3 years old, just entering his prime. Conservationists like us typically don't intervene in nature's processes. But this wasn't a natural situation. Increased human development upstream had altered the flood patterns, making them more sudden and severe than wildlife had evolved to handle. As we approached, I could see the lion was nearly exhausted. His head kept submerging under the surface, emerging less frequently. There was no time for debate or careful planning. "And get us close to him," I instructed Joseph, removing my jacket and shoes. "Keep the motor running to counter the current." "You can't be serious," Joseph said. But he maneuvered the boat as instructed, his years of river experience evident in his precise control. "Just be ready to pull us both out," I said, securing a rescue rope around my waist and handing the other end to Joseph. Before he could object further, I slipped over the side of the boat into the muddy water. The river was cold despite the African heat, its current stronger than it appeared from above. I swam toward the struggling lion, keeping my movements as steady and non-threatening as possible. The big cat saw me approaching and let out a weak roar, a sound more of fear than aggression. "It's okay," I said, with the calm, low voice I had used around wild animals for years. "I'm going to help you." I knew, of course, that the lion couldn't understand my words, but animals respond to tone and energy. I needed to project confidence and calm, not fear or excitement that might further agitate the already stressed predator. When I reached the lion, he had almost stopped struggling, a dangerous sign of exhaustion. Up close, I could see he was even younger than I had initially thought, probably barely past adolescence. his amber eyes fixed on me with a mixture of fear and what I could only interpret as desperate hope. I positioned myself to the side rather than in front of the animal, respecting his personal space as much as possible under the circumstances. "Let's get you to shore," I said, gently placing my hands under his body to help keep him afloat. To my amazement, the lion didn't attack, perhaps too exhausted to fight, or perhaps understanding on some primitive level that I represented his only chance of survival. He allowed me to bear his weight in the water. Joseph had maneuvered the boat as close as he dared, but the current made it impossible to bring the lion directly aboard without risking capsizing. "To the sandbar!" he shouted, pointing to a small island of silt about 30 yards downstream. "The current will help you." I nodded, conserving my breath as I guided the lion in that direction, using the river's flow to our advantage rather than fighting against it. The big cat seemed to understand the plan, his powerful paws beginning to paddle more purposefully as I supported his hindquarters. If you're finding this incredible story as captivating as I am, don't forget to comment what you think about this extraordinary encounter and subscribe for more amazing nature stories. Those 30 yards felt like miles. The lion was heavy, his soaked fur adding to the weight. My arms burned with the effort of keeping us both afloat while navigating the current. Joseph kept pace in the boat, ready to intervene if either of us went under. Finally, my feet touched the muddy bottom of the sandbar. The lion felt the ground beneath us and lunged forward, dragging himself onto the temporary island. I followed, collapsing on my hands and knees in the mud, my lungs gasping from the effort. For a moment, we both just breathed, man and lion, side by side on a small piece of land in the middle of a swollen river. The lion lay on his side, his chest expanding and contracting rapidly, water streaming from his golden coat. I remained at a respectful distance, giving him space while I recovered my own strength. Joseph brought the boat alongside the sandbar. "Mike, let's go," he urged, looking at the lion warily. "You've done what you could. Let's leave before he recovers enough to remember he's a predator." I knew he was right. What I had done went against all safety protocols and common sense. Now that the immediate danger of drowning had passed, the natural order would reassert itself. A wild lion, even a young one, was unpredictable and potentially lethal. I began backing toward the boat, keeping my eyes on the lion, moving slowly to avoid triggering his predatory instincts. The big cat lifted his head, watching me retreat. Our eyes met, and something passed between us. Some wordless communication that I still struggle to articulate. Then the lion did something that stopped me cold. He rose unsteadily, shook the water from his coat like a giant house cat, and took a step toward me. Joseph shouted a warning, already reaching for the tranquilizer rifle we kept for emergencies, but I raised my hand, signaling him to wait. The lion's body language wasn't aggressive. No lowered head, no flattened ears, no bared teeth. Instead, he moved with what I could only describe as deliberate calm. 3 more steps, and he was directly in front of me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to dive into the boat, to put distance between myself and those powerful jaws that could crush my skull with a single bite. Instead, I held my position, my heart beating so loudly I was sure the lion could hear it. What happened next would be captured on Joseph's phone camera and soon amaze millions around the world. The lion raised his right paw and extended it toward me, almost like a person offering a handshake. It hung there in the air between us, this impossible gesture that defied everything I knew about wild animal behavior. Time seemed suspended as I stared at the extended paw, water still dripping from his coat. Joseph warned from the boat, his voice tense, but something deep within me, instinct, intuition, madness perhaps, told me this was a moment of profound significance. Slowly, giving the lion every chance to withdraw, I extended my own right hand. The lion lowered his massive paw to my palm, his rough pads pressing against my skin, claws mercifully retracted. For 3 heartbeats we remained connected, human hand grasping lion paw in what could only be described as deliberate contact. Then, as if satisfied with this exchange, the lion withdrew his paw. He gave a slight nod that seemed almost human in its intentionality and stepped away. He walked to the far edge of the sandbar, sat facing the riverbank, and waited as if expecting the next stage of his rescue. Joseph was filming now, having recovered enough from his shock to document what was happening. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured, his earlier fear giving way to wonder. "Never in 25 years working with wildlife." "Neither have I admitted, still processing what had just occurred. My hand tingled where the lion had touched me, not from any injury, but from the sheer improbability of the contact. Now we had a new problem. The sandbar was temporary, already shrinking as the river continued to rise with the season's heavy rains. We needed to get the lion to the main shore, but our small boat couldn't safely transport both us and a 400-pound predator. "Oh, I'll radio for the larger boat," Joseph suggested, reaching for the communication equipment. "No time," I replied, noticing how the water was already encroaching on our small refuge. "The current is strengthening, and he's still exhausted. He might not survive another swim." I made a decision that, in retrospect, was even more reckless than my initial rescue attempt. "I'm going to guide him to shore." Joseph looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "You're going to what?" "Look at him," I said, gesturing toward the lion, who remained calmly seated, occasionally glancing our way. "He's not acting like a typical wild lion. Something is different here. I think he knows we're trying to help." Before Joseph could object further, I slipped back into the water, positioning myself beside the lion. "Come on," I said, using the same calm, encouraging tone I had used before. "Let's get you home." To my colleague's visible disbelief, the lion stood and followed me into the water. Joseph kept the boat close as we began our swim to shore, ready to intervene if the situation changed, but the lion maintained peaceful behavior, swimming beside me with more strength than before, occasionally looking over as if to ensure I was still there. The swim to the main shore took nearly 15 minutes, fighting against sections of current that threatened to sweep us downstream. By the time we reached shallow water, I was completely exhausted, my muscles burning from the extended effort. The lion also showed signs of fatigue, but pushed forward with determination until we both collapsed on the muddy bank. Joseph brought the boat to shore at a short distance, approaching cautiously with the tranquilizer rifle now in hand. "Mike, move away from him slowly," he directed. "You've done enough. Let's not tempt fate." I knew he was right. Whatever unusual connection had formed between the lion and me during the rescue, he was still a wild predator, one that would normally view humans as either a threat or potential prey. I began to move away, expecting the lion to shake himself off and disappear into the bush now that he was safe on land. Instead, he followed me. "Stop moving," Joseph said tensely, raising the rifle to his shoulder. I froze, and the lion stopped too, maintaining the same few feet of distance between us. He showed no signs of aggression, no flattened ears, no growls, no crouched posture indicating an imminent attack. Instead, he simply stood there watching me with an intensity that felt almost like communication. "I think he's injured," I said, noticing for the first time that the lion was favoring his left hind leg. And that might be why he was in the river to begin with. He might have been trying to cross at a shallow point and got swept away. Joseph lowered the rifle slightly, but remained vigilant. If he's injured, he's even more dangerous. Wounded predators are unpredictable. He was right again. But the lion's behavior continued to contradict everything we knew about wild animal responses. He made no attempt to flee or assert dominance. Instead, he simply waited, his gaze fixed on me, with what I could only interpret as expectation. "And I need to check his paw," I said, making a decision that went against all wildlife management protocols. "Absolutely not," Joseph objected. "We've already gone far beyond safety limits. We should tranquilize him now if you want to help further." The problem with tranquilizing was that the drugs took time to metabolize out of the system. An already weakened animal might not handle the additional stress well, and something told me this unusual moment of trust would be broken if we took that approach. "Oh, give me 5 minutes," I said. "Keep the rifle ready. If he shows any sign of aggression, do what you need to do." Before Joseph could argue further, I slowly knelt, making myself less threatening. The lion watched, then, to my continued amazement, lay down as well, extending his left hind leg slightly, as if presenting the injury for examination. I approached inch by inch, moving with deliberate slowness, speaking softly the entire time. "Just want to see what's wrong, big guy. Just trying to help you a little more." When I was within arm's reach, I paused, giving the lion time to reconsider this unprecedented interaction. He remained still, only his tail moving slightly at the tip, a sign of attention rather than agitation. With extreme caution, I extended my hand toward the injured paw. The lion watched but made no move to stop me. I gently touched the area above what appeared to be a deep puncture wound just above the animal's hock. The flesh around it was swollen and warm to the touch. Signs of infection. "He has a serious wound here," I called to Joseph, who was documenting everything on his phone. "That looks like a puncture, maybe from a fight with another male or an encounter with a buffalo. It's infected." This explained the lion's unusual behavior. The infection was probably causing fever, disorientation, and weakness, which could have contributed to him being caught in the river's current. It also potentially explained his atypical response to human intervention. Animals in distress sometimes show behaviors outside their normal patterns. "We need antibiotics and to clean that wound," I said, carefully moving back from the lion, who made no move to follow this time. "Radio the veterinary team. Tell them we need Dr. Mbuasa here as soon as possible." Joseph made the call while I maintained a watchful but non-threatening presence near the wounded lion. Within 20 minutes, we heard the approach of the park's veterinary jeep. Dr. Lina Muasa, the park's chief veterinarian, had personally responded to the unusual situation Joseph had described. She approached cautiously, tranquilizer gun in hand, expecting to need to sedate the lion for treatment. She stopped short when she saw the scene, me sitting on the ground a few feet from the lion, who remained calm despite the arrival of another human. "What the hell is going on here, Mike?" she asked, her expression a mixture of professional concern and undisguised amazement. "I'm not completely sure," I admitted, "but I think he knows we're trying to help him." Dr. Wasa had worked with wildlife for over 20 years and had seen animals do remarkable things, but the scene before her clearly exceeded even her extensive experience. "He needs antibiotics and wound treatment," I explained. "And left hind leg above the hock, deep infected puncture." She nodded, assessing the situation with practical efficiency. "Despite its unprecedented nature, we should still sedate him for proper treatment. Even if he's being cooperative now, the treatment will be painful. He might react instinctively." I looked at the lion, who had been watching our exchange with alert interest. "I think you're right," I conceded. "But let's use the lowest effective dose. He's already weakened from the river and the infection." Dr. Muasa prepared the tranquilizer dart with a carefully calculated dose. The lion watched her movements but remained calm, as if somehow understanding that this new development was part of the help being offered. When she raised the dart gun, I spoke softly to the lion. This is going to help you feel better, but it's going to sting a little first. Just like you helped me in the river, I'm asking you to trust me now." The tranquilizer took effect quickly. The lion's eyes grew heavy, his massive head gradually lowering to rest on his paws before sliding into sedated sleep. Dr. Mwasa moved efficiently, cleaning and treating the infected wound while Joseph and I assisted. "This puncture is deep," she commented, washing the wound with antiseptic solution. "Probably from a buffalo horn based on the angle and size. He's lucky it didn't hit an artery." She administered a long-acting antibiotic injection and applied medicated ointment to the area. "The infection is significant. He wouldn't have survived much longer without treatment, especially after that river ordeal." "Will he recover?" I asked, helping to hold equipment as she worked. "Yes, but he'll need follow-up treatment." She looked at me thoughtfully. "This behavior is extraordinary, Mike. In 20 years of wildlife medicine, I've never seen a wild lion respond to humans this way. We should document everything carefully." Joseph had already been recording most of the encounter on his phone. "Way ahead of you, Doctor. I've got it all. The river rescue, the handshake, everything up to now." We worked quickly to complete the treatment before the tranquilizer wore off. Dr. Mwasa placed a small tracking device in the lion's ear. Standard procedure for monitored wildlife in the park, but especially important in this unusual case. "He should sleep for another hour," she said, as we packed up the medical supplies. "We should move away before he wakes up. Even with this unprecedented behavior, he's still a wild predator coming out of sedation." I knew she was right, but leaving felt strangely difficult. This lion and I had shared something profound, something that defied conventional understanding of human-wildlife interaction. Reluctantly, I helped gather the remaining equipment, taking one last look at the sleeping lion before retreating to the vehicles parked at a safe distance. We established an observation post on higher ground, watching through binoculars as the lion eventually stirred, groggy at first, then with growing alertness. He examined his treated paw, sniffing the medication before standing to test his weight on it. Already his movements seemed less painful. To our surprise, instead of immediately heading into the bush, the lion looked around, apparently searching for something or someone. His gaze eventually found our vehicles on the hillside. For a long moment, he stared in our direction, before offering what seemed to be a final acknowledgement, a slight bow of his massive head. Then he turned and disappeared into the tall grass. "Did you see that?" Joseph whispered, still filming. "It was like he was saying thank you." "I think he was," I suggested, moved by the moment. "Doctor." Mwasa was more measured in her response, though I could see that even her scientific skepticism had been challenged by what we had witnessed. "We should be careful about anthropomorphizing, but I admit this is exceptional. We'll monitor him closely through the tracking device." News of the unusual rescue spread quickly through the park staff, though we agreed to keep it contained until we had more information about the lion's progress. Over the following week, I joined the wildlife management team in tracking the lion's movements via his new ear tag. He stayed within his pride's territory, but remained somewhat separate, probably allowing his paw to heal before rejoining the demanding social life of the group. 10 days after the river incident, I was reviewing trail camera footage with Joseph when we saw our lion in one of the recordings. He was moving much more easily. The treatment had clearly reduced the infection. More surprisingly, he was accompanied by another male, probably a coalition partner, as lions often form these male alliances for territorial defense and pride takeovers. "He looks good," Joseph observed. "It looks like the antibiotics did their job." I nodded, relieved to see the improvement. "Dr. Mwasa wants to get another dose into him if possible. She's worried about infection recurrence." "How do you plan to do that?" Joseph said with a wry smile. "I doubt we'll have another river rescue opportunity." His question was valid. Darting the lion from a distance was possible, but risked disturbing both the animal and his natural behaviors, something we tried to minimize in our conservation work. The question became moot the next morning. I was checking water quality samples at one of the smaller watering holes when Joseph contacted me by radio, urgency in his voice. "Mike, you need to come to the North Road overlook now." "What's happening?" I asked, already packing my equipment. "It's your lion. He's here, and he's not alone." 20 minutes later, I pulled up beside Joseph's vehicle at the overlook point. He was standing beside it, binoculars raised, an expression of disbelief on his face. "Look," he said simply, handing me the binoculars and pointing. About 200 yards away, at the edge of the clearing, stood our lion. Beside him was his coalition partner, and behind them, partially obscured by bushes, were the shadowy forms of several lionesses, his pride. But what took my breath away was what lay at their feet, the body of a freshly killed impala. As we watched, the lion looked directly toward us. Then he deliberately stepped away from the prey, moving several yards back, bringing his coalition partner with him through what seemed to be subtle communication. The lionesses remained in the background, watching but not approaching. He's offering us his prey," Joseph whispered incredulously. "I've heard old legends from village elders about lions showing gratitude, but I never believed them until now." I wasn't sure what to believe myself, but the lion's behavior was undeniably intentional. After ensuring his companions maintained their distance, he settled on his haunches, watching us expectantly. I radioed Dr. Muasa, who arrived 30 minutes later with her veterinary team. She assessed the situation with professional caution. "This is an unprecedented opportunity," she admitted. "We can use the prey site to administer the follow-up antibiotics without darting him, but we need to be extremely careful. The other lions might not share his unusual tolerance." We developed a quick plan using the vehicles as safety barriers. Dr. Mwasa prepared a portion of meat injected with antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. I would place it near the original prey, making it clear which portion was intended for our lion. As I approached the prey site carrying the medicated meat on a long stick, the lion watched calmly. His partner and the lionesses were more alert, some standing tensely, but they took cues from our lion's relaxed behavior. I placed the portion of meat separate from the main prey and slowly backed away. The lion immediately approached, sniffed the medicated meat, then consumed it completely while maintaining eye contact with me across the distance. Only after he finished did he return to the main prey, allowing his coalition partner and eventually the lionesses to approach and feed. Over the following months, the story of the handshake lion, as the park staff had dubbed him, became something of a legend in conservation circles. The video Joseph had taken went viral after National Geographic featured it in a special about unusual animal behaviors, sparking intense debate among wildlife experts worldwide. Some scientists suggested the lion had had prior human contact, perhaps being an orphaned cub raised by humans before release, though our records showed no such lions released in the area. Others proposed more physiological explanations. The infection had caused fever-induced behavioral changes, or the stress of nearly drowning had temporarily altered his natural fear responses. I maintained a more personal theory, one I shared only with Joseph and Dr. Mwasa. During our continued monitoring of the lion's progress, some connections transcend species, occurring in moments of mutual vulnerability and need. For a brief time, the lion and I had moved beyond our natural roles as predator and potential prey, forming something more, a momentary alliance based on the recognition of another being suffering and the simple act of helping. A year after the river rescue, I was leading a small group of conservation donors on a special tour of the park. As we stopped at an overlook with a view of the valley, A familiar form emerged from the tall grass about 50 yards away. Our lion, now fully recovered, his mane fuller and more magnificent than before, paused, looking directly toward our vehicle, toward me. "It's him," whispered one of the donors, having heard the story that had now become part of the park's conservation message. "Yes," I confirmed quietly, "that's him." The lion held my gaze for a long moment, before raising his right paw slightly. Not fully extended as before, but raised enough to be notable, deliberate. Then he turned and faded back into the golden grass of the savannah, a sovereign creature of the wild who for one extraordinary moment had reached across the divide between our worlds. Some connections don't need explanation or scientific validation. They simply are. Profound moments that remind us that in this vast, complex web of life on Earth, we are all, in our own way, reaching for understanding and connection across the boundaries that seem to divide us.